Welcome back to Silent Revenge Lab, the best channel for revenge stories. They say money can't buy happiness, but in Manhattan, it can certainly buy a version of the truth that erases people like me. My name is Sloane Sterling. I'm 27 years old, and for my entire life, I was the clutter in the Sterling family portrait. While my sister, Vivienne, was being groomed as the $100 million face of Sterling Global Logistics, I was the girl hidden in the back of the town car, the one they told to stay quiet because my brain didn't work like theirs. I have severe dyslexia. To my father, Alistair Sterling, that wasn't a learning difference, it was a defect. To my mother, it was a social embarrassment. They spent 2 decades calling me the slow one behind closed doors and delicate in public. I wasn't allowed to touch the family business. I wasn't even allowed to choose my own clothes for Vivienne's legacy gala at the St. Regis. I was just the shadow, the disappointment, the girl who supposedly couldn't read a balance sheet to save her life. But as I stood there, watching my father hand Vivienne the symbolic keys to the company, a man in a charcoal suit, someone I had never seen before, approached me. He didn't look at the stage. He looked straight at me. He didn't offer a drink. He offered an envelope. "Your grandmother, Beatrice, told me to wait for this exact moment," he whispered. "She said when they finally take everything from you, that's when you're ready to take it all back." Hold on, before we get into the real stuff, I want to know, what are you doing at this exact moment while hearing my voice? I love seeing your answers down below in the comments. Seriously, are you folding laundry, driving, or just hiding from your boss? Let me know. Now, you have to understand the stakes. The Sterlings didn't just have money, they had power. My father ran a logistics empire worth $115 million. We lived in a penthouse that overlooked Central Park like we owned the sky.
And Vivienne?
She was the perfect specimen. Oxford grad, fluent in 4 languages and cruel in 3 of them. She spent our childhood correcting my reading in front of guests just to watch me turn red. "Oh, Sloane," she'd smirk, loud enough for the board members to hear. "It's okay. Not everyone is meant for the C-suite. Some people are just meant to be cared for." My parents nodded along. They gave her a $200,000 salary for a consultant role while I was given a stipend that barely covered a studio apartment in Queens, under the condition that I stayed out of the press. They told me I was lucky to have the Sterling name at all. They made me feel like a charity case in my own home. But my grandmother Beatrice, she was different. She was the one who actually built the foundation of Sterling Global back in the 70s. She was a shark in silk. Everyone feared her, but she was the only one who ever sat with me and my wooden blocks, teaching me how to see patterns when I couldn't see letters. She died 3 years ago, or so I thought. Well, she died, but her influence? That was very much alive in that envelope. As the crowd roared for Vivienne, I stepped into the hallway and tore the paper open. My hands were shaking. I expected a letter of comfort, maybe a small trust fund. Instead, I saw a legal document titled the Sovereign Share Assignment. My eyes hovered over the numbers. I had to squint to make sure the dyslexia wasn't playing tricks on me. It wasn't $50,000. It wasn't $500,000. It was a bank draft and a deed transfer totaling $47 million, along with a controlling 51% stake in the holding company that owned my father's office building. The slow daughter was suddenly the landlord of the man who despised her. And the best part? The party wasn't even over yet. I looked back at the ballroom. My father was raising a glass, laughing with the mayor. He had no idea that in exactly 60 seconds, I was going to walk onto that stage and deliver a speech that would bankrupt his reputation. Because Grandma Beatrice didn't just leave me money. She left me the receipts. Proof that my father hadn't built the empire. He had stolen it. And I was about to show the world exactly how slow I really was. The air in the hallway felt thinner. Every breath I took felt like I was inhaling the scent of old wood and cold revenge. My father, Alistair, always said I lacked the Sterling instinct. He told the world I was a liability, a girl who couldn't handle the complexities of high finance. But staring at that $47 million check, I realized the only thing complex about our family was the depth of their lies. The man in the charcoal suit, whose name was Mr. Sterling's former head of security, Marcus, didn't leave. He stood there like a stone wall. "Your grandmother knew they would try to sideline you today," Marcus said, his voice low and gravelly. "She spent the last 5 years of her life moving assets into a blind trust. Your father thinks he's the majority shareholder of Sterling Global. He's not. He's been operating on a lease, and that lease just expired." I felt a surge of adrenaline, so hot it made my fingertips tingle. For 27 years, I had played the role of the quiet, struggling daughter. I had sat through dinners where they talked over me as if I were a piece of furniture. I had watched Vivienne get the Ferraris and the penthouses while I was told to save my pennies from my meager allowance. I looked at the documents again. It wasn't just money. It was a digital key, a drive containing decades of recorded board meetings. Meetings where my father and Vivienne openly discussed managing the Sloane problem. They didn't just exclude me. They actively conspired to keep me medicated and isolated, so I wouldn't realize that my grandmother had actually intended for me to lead. "Why me?" I whispered to Marcus. "They're right about one thing. I can't even read a contract without the letters jumping off the page." Marcus leaned in, a ghost of a smile on his face. "Beatrice used to say that people who read too fast miss the details. She said your dyslexia forced you to see the world in systems and structures. You don't see words, Sloane. You see the truth between them." She didn't want a reader. She wanted a visionary. I walked back toward the heavy oak doors of the ballroom. Through the glass, I could see Vivienne. She was standing on the podium now, holding a diamond-encrusted microphone. She looked like a queen. She was laughing, telling a charming story about how she used to have to help her poor, slow sister with her homework. The audience chuckled. It was a joke to them. My life was a punchline for the elite. "I used to think I was protecting Sloane by taking the lead," Vivienne said into the mic, her voice dripping with fake empathy. "But today, as I take the helm of Sterling Global, I promise to ensure she is always looked after, in a quiet, comfortable place." The comfortable place she was referring to? A high-end assisted living facility in upstate New York they had been trying to force me into for months. They wanted me gone. They wanted the defect out of sight so they could enjoy the empire in peace. But they forgot one thing about the Sterling Empire. It wasn't built on a foundation of kindness. It was built on a foundation of iron. And I was the only one left with the iron in my blood. I checked my phone. I had already forwarded the digital key to the ballroom's AV technician. A guy I'd been tipped off was actually on my grandmother's secret payroll for years. "Marcus," I said, not looking back. "How fast can you get the press to the front door?" "They're already here, Miss Sterling." They were told a major restructuring announcement was coming at 9 p.m. I looked at my watch. It was 8:59. My father was walking toward Vivienne to give her a hug. The Legacy Gala was supposed to be his crowning achievement. He was about to retire a hero. Instead, he was about to become the man who tried to rob his own daughter of her birthright. I pushed the doors open. The light hit me, blindingly bright. I didn't hide. I didn't look down. I walked straight down the center aisle, the $47 million check clutched in my hand like a weapon. The room went silent. The slow girl was crashing the party. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't there to listen. I was there to speak. As I marched toward the stage, I could feel the weight of 300 pairs of eyes on me. I saw my mother, Eleanor, freeze with a glass of Pinot Noir halfway to her lips. Her eyes didn't show love. They showed panic. To her, I wasn't a daughter returning to the fold. I was a stain on a white carpet that she couldn't scrub out. My father, Alistair, stepped forward, his face twisting into a mask of concerned patriarch. He tried to catch my arm as I passed, whispering through gritted teeth, "Sloane, what are you doing? You're making a scene. Go back to the suite before you embarrass yourself." "I'm not the one who's about to be embarrassed, Dad," I said, my voice steady, eyes locked on the stage. I didn't stop until I was standing right next to Vivienne. Up close, she smelled like expensive lilies and arrogance. She didn't move the microphone. She just looked at me with that same pitying smile she'd used since we were toddlers. "Sloane, honey," Vivienne cooed, her voice still projecting through the speakers. I know this is a big day for the family and big crowds can be overwhelming for you. Why don't we go find your nurse? The crowd chuckled. A few people actually shook their heads in sympathy. It was the ultimate gaslight, portraying my quest for dignity as a mental breakdown. I don't need a nurse, Vivienne, I said, reaching out and firmly taking the microphone from her hand. The feedback shrieked for a second, a sharp, piercing sound that cut through the chatter like a knife. And I don't need your protection. I turned to the audience. My heart was hammering against my ribs, but my grandmother's voice was echoing in my head. The truth doesn't need to be read, Sloane. It needs to be felt. For 27 years, I began, my voice amplified and echoing off the vaulted ceilings. You've all been told a story. The story of the brilliant Vivienne and her slow sister. You were told I couldn't handle the family business, that I lacked the intellect to understand the Sterling legacy. I looked directly at my father. He was signaled to the security guards, his face turning a dangerous shade of purple. But the Sterling legacy isn't what you think it is. I continued, holding up the envelope. My grandmother, Beatrice, knew that some people use words to build empires, while others use them to hide crimes. She left me something, not because I'm delicate, but because I'm the only one who actually knows how to count the cost of a lie. Suddenly, the massive LED screens behind me, the ones that had been looping tribute videos of Vivienne's achievements, flickered and went black. The room fell into a heavy, expectant silence. Then, a voice filled the room. It wasn't mine. It was a recording. It was grainy, but the voice was unmistakable. It was my father, Alistair, recorded 3 years ago, just weeks before Beatrice passed away. The old woman is senile, Eleanor. His voice boomed over the high-end speakers. She's trying to leave the majority stake to Sloane, to a girl who can't even read a grocery list. I've already talked to the lawyers. We'll move the assets to the Shell holding company before the probate hits. If Sloane asks, we tell her there's nothing left but a small monthly stipend. She's too dim to ever check the ledgers anyway. The gasp from the audience was so collective it sounded like a windstorm. My mother dropped her glass. It shattered on the floor, the red wine spreading like a pool of blood. Vivienne reached for the mic, her face pale. This is a fake. A deep fake. Sloane, you've lost your mind. But I wasn't done. I pointed to the screen as it roared back to life, displaying a legal document in high definition. It was the $47 million check, followed by the deed to the Sterling Plaza, the very building we were standing in. That recording isn't a fake, I said, my voice dropping to a cold, hard whisper that carried through the stunned silence. And neither is this. As of tonight, I don't just own my share. I own the ground you're standing on. And Vivienne? About that consultant job. I leaned in closer to her, ensuring the mic caught every word. You're fired. The silence that followed was the loudest thing I had ever heard. But then I saw Marcus at the back of the room, opening the double doors. A swarm of reporters from the Wall Street Journal and the Times flooded in, their flashes turning the room into a strobe light of chaos. The trap was sprung. But as I looked at my father's crumbling face, I realized this wasn't the end of the war. It was just the first shot. Because he still had one card to play, a secret about my dyslexia that he had been keeping since I was 7 years old. The legacy gala was officially dead. In its place was a corporate execution. My father tried to rush the stage, his hands balled into fists, but Marcus and 2 other security guards, men I now realized had been loyal to my grandmother for years, stepped into his path. Get out of my way, Alistair bellowed, his voice cracking. Sloane, you think a piece of paper makes you a CEO? You're a medical liability. You have a documented cognitive impairment. He turned to the reporters, his eyes wide and desperate. My daughter is unwell. She suffered from severe developmental delays since childhood. These documents, she doesn't even have the capacity to understand what she's holding. She's been manipulated by disgruntled former employees. I felt a cold shiver go down my spine. This was his ultimate weapon. He wasn't going to fight the money. He was going to fight my mind. He had spent 20 years building a paper trail of my incompetence. Every doctor I had seen, every tutor I had worked with, they were all on his payroll. Or so I thought. Is that right, Dad? I asked, my voice cutting through his shouting. I stepped down from the podium, walking right up to him until we were inches apart. You want to talk about my medical records? You want to talk about the slow girl who couldn't keep up? I pulled a second, smaller envelope from my clutch. This one wasn't from a lawyer. It was from a clinic in Zurich, dated only 3 months ago. For years, you told me I had a learning disability that made me unfit for leadership. I said, loud enough for the nearest microphones to catch. You gave me pills to focus, pills that made me groggy, confused, and compliant. You told me my brain was broken, but I went to a specialist, someone you couldn't buy. I pulled out the report. I don't have a cognitive impairment, Alistair. I have high-functioning dyslexia combined with an IQ in the 140s. The confusion I felt, the slowness, those were the side effects of the medication you forced me to take since I was 7 years old. You didn't treat a disability. You created one to keep me from realizing I was smarter than you. The room went deathly quiet. This wasn't just corporate theft anymore. This was child abuse disguised as parental care. My mother, Eleanor, let out a choked sob. Alistair, we said it was for her own good. To keep her safe from the pressure. Shut up, Eleanor. Alistair snapped, but the damage was done. The confession was in her eyes. I felt a wave of nausea. All those years I spent crying over textbooks, feeling like a failure, wondering why I couldn't be normal like Vivienne. It was all a manufactured prison. They hadn't just stolen my inheritance. They had stolen my childhood. They had gaslit me into believing I was broken so they could keep the keys to the kingdom. Vivienne stepped forward, her face twisted in a sneer. Even if that's true, Sloane, you have no experience. You have no allies. The board will never vote for a girl who spent her 20s in rehab for delicate nerves. You have the money, sure, but you don't have the company. Actually, I said, a slow, dangerous smile spreading across my face. I have something better than the board. I have the debt. I looked at my father. His face went from purple to a ghostly, sickly white. Grandmother Beatrice knew you were over-leveraging Sterling Global to fund your private jet lifestyle and Vivienne's failed tech startups. I explained. She didn't just leave me the $47 million check, Alistair. She left me the $110 million promissory note you signed against the family estate, the note that is now in default. I leaned in, whispering so only he could hear. I'm not just your daughter anymore, Dad. I'm your primary creditor. And I've decided I'm not interested in a payment plan. The look of pure, unadulterated terror in his eyes was the most beautiful thing I had ever seen. But as I turned to walk away, Marcus grabbed my shoulder and leaned in. Sloane, we need to go.
Now.
Your father's personal fixer just entered the building through the kitchen. He's not here to talk about debt. My heart leaped into my throat. The revenge was working, but I had underestimated how far a cornered animal would go to protect its cage. The back exit now, Marcus hissed. My heart was thumping against my ribs like a trapped bird. 1 second I was the queen of the ballroom, and the next I was a target. I hadn't even had time to savor the look on Vivienne's face before the reality of the Sterling family's dark side caught up to me. My father didn't play by the rules of the SEC. He played by the rules of the street. The ones he'd learned while building skyscrapers in the rougher parts of the city. We ducked through a heavy set of service doors, the smell of expensive perfume replaced by the scent of industrial cleaner and garbage. Who is he, Marcus? I panted, my heels clicking painfully against the concrete floor. The fixer? Who is he? His name is Silas, Marcus said, checking his watch and looking over his shoulder. He's been on your father's payroll for 20 years. He's the one who made problems disappear. Usually, those problems were union leaders or whistleblowers. Tonight, the problem is you and those documents. We reached the service elevator. Marcus slammed the button, but the lights on the panel remained dark.
Dead.
He's already cut the power to this bank, Marcus cursed. We're taking the stairs. 12 flights.
Can you do it?
I've spent 20 years being told I'm weak. I said, kicking off my designer heels and standing barefoot on the cold concrete. Watch me. We hit the stairwell just as the door above us groaned open. Heavy footsteps echoed from 3 floors up.
Slow.
Deliberate. The sound of someone who knew exactly where their prey was heading. As we descended, the shadows seemed to stretch. Every floor we passed felt like a mile. My mind was racing, not with the slowness my parents mocked, but with the high-speed pattern recognition my grandmother had nurtured. I realized then that my father's fixer wouldn't just be at the stairs. He'd have the exits blocked. "Marcus, wait," I whispered, grabbing his arm as we reached the 4th floor. "He expects us to go to the street. He expects a black car. That's where he'll have his team. We can't stay in the building, Sloane. It's a cage." "There's a laundry chute," I said, remembering the blueprints of the hotel I'd obsessively studied when I was bored during family functions. "It leads to the basement level, which connects to the subway ventilation system. It's tight, it's dirty, and it's the only place a delicate girl like me wouldn't go." Marcus looked at me, a flash of respect in his eyes. "You really do see the world differently, don't you?" We scrambled toward the laundry room. The air was thick with steam and the roar of industrial dryers. I found the metal hatch. It was small. I looked at the $47 million check, still tucked into my bodice, and the digital drive in my hand.
Clang.
The door to the laundry room swung open. A man stood there. He wasn't a giant. He was thin, wearing a nondescript gray jacket, with eyes that looked like they'd never seen a moment of kindness. Silas. He didn't have a gun out, but his hand was tucked inside his coat. "Sloane," he said, his voice surprisingly soft. "Your father is very concerned about your health. He thinks the excitement has made you delusional. He wants me to take you to the clinic for your own safety." "The only thing delusional in this building is my father's belief that he's still in charge," I spat. Silas took a step forward. Marcus moved to intercept, but Silas was faster. He pulled a baton from his coat, a quick silver flash, and aimed for Marcus's temple. I didn't wait to see the impact. I dove into the laundry chute. The world turned into a blur of fabric and darkness. I screamed as I tumbled down the metal tunnel, smelling the scent of 1,000 bleached sheets. I hit the bottom with a thud that knocked the wind out of me. I lay there in the dark, buried under a mountain of dirty hotel linens. It was silent. Then, I heard the faint thump-thump-thump of someone sliding down the chute after me. Was it Marcus? Or was it the man sent to make me disappear? I scrambled out of the pile, my feet stinging, and looked for an exit. But as the figure emerged from the linens, I realized I had made a terrible mistake. It wasn't Marcus, and it wasn't Silas. It was Vivienne, and she was holding my grandmother's original will. "You really thought she loved you more?" Vivienne hissed, her face smeared with soot but her eyes burning with malice. "You only read the first page, Sloane. You should have checked the back." I backed away, my bare feet hitting the cold, damp concrete. The $47 million check felt like it was burning a hole against my skin, but Vivienne's words felt like ice. "What are you talking about, Vivienne?" I demanded, my voice echoing in the hollow space. "The shares are mine. The building is mine. Grandmother Beatrice made sure of it." Vivienne let out a jagged, hysterical laugh. She held up a single sheet of yellowing parchment, the back page of the sovereign share assignment. "You and your visionary brain, Sloane. You're so busy looking at the big patterns that you miss the fine print. Typical." She stepped into a pool of light, pointing at a clause at the very bottom of the page. Clause 14b, the sanity provision. Grandmother was a shark, remember? She didn't want the empire going to anyone, and I mean anyone, who had a history of clinical instability or inability to manage their own affairs. If the primary heir is deemed unfit, the entire trust, the $47 million, the real estate, it all reverts to the secondary beneficiary. She tapped her chest with a manicured nail. "That's me, Sloane. All I had to do was let you make your big, dramatic entrance. All I had to do was let you prove to a room full of 350 witnesses and the national press that you finally snapped." My heart dropped. The gala wasn't just my revenge. It was the trap they had set for me. By coming out of the shadows, by screaming about conspiracies and secret recordings, I had played right into the narrative they'd spent 20 years building. To the world, I didn't look like a hero. I looked like a disgruntled, mentally ill daughter having a public breakdown. The recording of Dad? Vivienne smirked. Inadmissible. Private conversation. Illegally recorded. But your performance on that stage? That was public. That was a gift. I looked at the laundry chute. No sign of Marcus. I was alone in the bowels of a city with a sister who had spent her life trying to erase me. You think they'll believe you? I asked, trying to keep my voice from trembling. After what I said about the medication. After the Zurich report? The Zurich report from a clinic Dad already bought out an hour ago? Vivienne countered, stepping closer. Money moves faster than the truth, Sloane. By tomorrow morning, the headlines won't be about Dad's fraud. They'll be about the Sterling tragedy, the story of a brilliant family forced to institutionalize their youngest daughter for her own safety. She reached out her hand, her eyes cold as diamonds. Give me the check, Sloane.
Give me the drive.
Walk away now, and maybe I'll make sure your room in the facility has a view of the woods. Keep fighting, and I'll make sure you're forgotten in a padded cell before the sun comes up. I looked at the check. $47 million. It was enough to change the world. But as I looked at Vivienne, I saw the one thing she hadn't accounted for. She thought I was playing for the money. She thought I wanted the empire. She didn't realize I was there to burn it down. You're right about one thing, Vivienne, I said, my voice suddenly calm. I do see patterns, and I see a pattern in this room that you're completely ignoring. I pointed to the wall behind her. A small, red light was blinking on a security camera, one that was part of the hotel's independent fire safety system, not the Sterling network. That camera isn't just recording, I whispered. It's live streaming. Because I didn't just invite the press to the ballroom. I gave the password to the hotel's internal feed to every major news outlet in the city. They've been watching us since we hit the laundry room. They just heard you admit to the sanity provision trap. They just heard you admit to buying off the Zurich clinic. Vivienne's face went from triumph to a sickly, pale green. She spun around, staring at the tiny red light. You wouldn't, she stammered. I'm the slow one, remember? I said, taking a step toward her. I don't play the corporate game. I play the long game. And right now, about 5 million people are watching the perfect Vivienne Sterling try to extort her sister in a basement full of dirty laundry. But then, a heavy thud echoed from the corridor. The door was being kicked in. It wasn't Marcus. It was Silas, and this time, he wasn't carrying a baton. He was carrying something much more permanent. The feed. Vivienne screamed at him. Silas, kill the feed. She's streaming us. Silas didn't look at the camera.
He looked at me.
And then, he did something I never expected. He turned his weapon toward Vivienne. Vivienne's hands flew up, her legacy crown finally slipping. Silas? What are you doing? I'm the one paying you now. Dad's account is frozen. I'm the secondary beneficiary. I'm the one who signs the checks. Silas didn't move. His eyes weren't on Vivienne. They were fixed on the small, glowing digital drive in my hand. You're wrong, Miss Vivienne, Silas said, his voice as cold as a tombstone. You think loyalty in this family is bought with a salary. But your grandmother, she understood a different kind of currency. She didn't just pay my medical bills when I was sick 10 years ago. She saved my son's life. I stared at him, my breath hitching. Silas, the fixer, the man my father used to bury his secrets, had been a sleeper agent for Beatrice Sterling all along. The order to take care of Sloane tonight didn't come from Alistair, Silas continued, his gaze shifting to me. It came from Vivienne. She told me to make sure you never made it to the subway, Sloane. She wanted the sanity provision to be triggered by your disappearance. Vivienne's face twisted into a mask of pure, ugly rage. You traitor. You're a hired thug. You're nothing. I'm the man who has the keys to your father's offshore accounts, Silas said calmly. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, encrypted transponder. And I'm the man who's been feeding the SEC information for the last 18 months. Sloane isn't the only one who's been waiting for tonight. Suddenly, the basement door burst open again. This time, It was Marcus, followed by 4 men in tactical vests with federal agent emblazoned across their backs. The Legacy Gala was no longer a family feud. It was a crime scene. Vivienne Sterling, you're under arrest for conspiracy to commit fraud and witness intimidation, the lead agent barked. As they moved in to cuff my sister, she didn't go quietly. She kicked. She screamed. She looked at me with a hatred so deep it felt like a physical weight. You think you won, Sloane? You're still the girl who can't read a map. You'll lose everything in 6 months because you don't know how to run a company. You're nothing without the name. I walked over to her, ignoring the agents, and looked her right in the eye. You're right, Vivienne. I don't know how to run a company the way you do, I whispered. I don't know how to lie, steal, or step on the people who built me up. But I do know how to read the room.
And right now,
The room is empty. You're the only one left in it. As they dragged her away, the basement fell silent. Marcus stepped up beside me, his suit jacket torn, a bruise forming on his jaw. You okay, Sloane? I looked down at the $47 million check. It was wrinkled. It was stained with soot, but it was real. I've spent 27 years being a ghost in my own house, Marcus, I said, my voice finally cracking. For the first time, I think I'm actually breathing. Don't get too comfortable, Marcus said, his face darkening. The feds have Vivienne and your father is being questioned, but there's one person missing from the head count. Your mother. I frowned. Eleanor? She's harmless. She's probably halfway to the Hamptons by now. That's what we thought, Marcus said, handing me his phone. But we just tracked her car. She didn't go to the Hamptons. She went to the one place Beatrice told you never to go. The Sterling Vault in New Jersey. My blood ran cold. The vault. It wasn't where the money was. It was where the original deeds, the ones that predated the 1965 founding, were kept. If my mother reached those and destroyed them, the $47 million check would be nothing but a piece of paper. The entire legal foundation of the Sterling Empire would vanish into ash. She's going to burn it, I realized. She's going to burn the evidence of how they stole the land from the original owners. We have 20 minutes before she reaches the gates, Marcus said. But the feds can't get a warrant for a private vault that quickly. If we're going to stop her, we have to do it ourselves. I looked at my bare, bruised feet. I looked at the dark tunnel of the subway ventilation system ahead. Let's go, I said. I've got one more pattern to break. Faster, Marcus. I urged, clutching the leather seat. My mother, Eleanor, had always played the part of the fragile, obedient wife. She was the woman who looked away when my father yelled, the one who sighed when I struggled with my lessons. I thought she was a victim of the Sterling name. I was wrong. She wasn't the victim. She was the silent partner. She was the one who kept the secrets buried while my father and Vivienne occupied the spotlight. If she opens that vault, it's over, Marcus said, weaving through traffic with surgical precision. The Sterling Vault isn't just a safe, Sloane. It's a dead drop for the family's unrecorded history. Beatrice once told me that if the papers in that vault ever saw the light of day, the Sterling name wouldn't just be ruined. It would be erased from history. What's in there, Marcus? My dyslexia. I couldn't read the old ledgers when I was a kid. But you knew her better than anyone. Marcus gripped the steering wheel, his knuckles white. Your father didn't just build Sterling Global. He seized it. In the late 60s, there were families, immigrant families, who owned the land where your flagship towers now stand. Your father used forged eminent domain papers to force them out for pennies. The original, unforged deeds are in that vault. If Eleanor burns them, the true owners can never claim what's theirs, and you'll be sitting on a throne of stolen bones. I felt a wave of cold fury. My inheritance wasn't just $47 million. It was a debt to the people my family had crushed. If I wanted to be different from Alistair and Vivienne, I couldn't just take the money. I had to return the truth. We screeched into the industrial park in New Jersey. The Sterling Vault sat like a concrete bunker under a canopy of dead oaks. I saw my mother's white Mercedes idling at the gate. The heavy steel door was already ajar. Wait for the feds, Marcus shouted, but I was already out of the car. I ran into the cold, sterile air of the bunker. The smell of ozone and old paper hit me instantly. I found her in the center of the room, standing over a heavy iron brazier. She had a stack of yellowing documents in her hand, and a lighter was sparking in her other. "Mom, stop." I screamed. Eleanor turned. She didn't look like the polished socialite I knew. Her hair was coming undone, and her eyes were wild with a desperate, terrifying loyalty. "I'm doing this for you, Sloane," she shrieked. "If these papers go public, the lawsuits will swallow every cent of that $47 million. You'll be poor. You'll be back in that studio apartment with nothing but your disability to keep you company. I'd rather be poor and honest than a Sterling with blood on my hands." I shouted, stepping closer. "Give me the papers, Mom. It's over. Alistair is in custody. Vivienne is gone." "They're gone because they were loud," Eleanor hissed, the lighter finally catching flame. "I was the one who kept us safe. I was the one who made sure the slow daughter was drugged enough to never ask questions. I did it to protect the legacy." She dropped the flame toward the first stack of deeds. In that split second, my brain didn't see words. It saw the physical trajectory of the fire. It saw the ventilation duct behind her. I didn't tackle her. Instead, I grabbed the heavy fire extinguisher from the wall and pulled the pin. Whoosh! The white chemical cloud erupted, dousing the brazier and knocking my mother back. She fell to the floor, gasping and covered in white powder. The papers were saved, but the wind from the extinguisher had blown a small, hidden compartment open in the back of the vault. A single, velvet-lined box fell out. I ignored my sobbing mother and reached for the box. Inside was a letter, handwritten in the shaky, elegant script of my Grandmother Beatrice. It was addressed to me, but it wasn't a will. It was a confession. "Oh, Sloane," my mother whispered from the floor, her voice trembling. "You shouldn't have opened that. Some things even $47 million can't fix." I opened the letter. My eyes struggled with the letters for a moment, but then the message snapped into focus. My heart stopped. The $47 million wasn't an inheritance. It was hush money, and the person it was meant to keep quiet wasn't me. I stared at the words. My dyslexia usually made sentences feel like a sliding puzzle, but these words, they were burned into the back of my retinas. "My dearest Sloane," the letter began. "If you are reading this, you have proven you have the Sterling iron. But iron is forged in fire, and your fire began with a lie even Alistair doesn't fully understand. You were never his disappointment, Sloane, because you were never his daughter." I felt the floor tilt beneath me. I looked at my mother, who was staring at the ground, unable to meet my eyes. "What is this?" I whispered, my voice sounding like it belonged to a stranger. "Mom, what is this?" The letter continued. Beatrice explained that in 1997, Alistair had been desperate for a second heir to secure a massive trust from the Sterling founders. But he was sterile. To keep the empire from collapsing into the hands of rival cousins, my mother had made a deal. Beatrice had arranged for a surrogate, not a medical one, but a secret arrangement with a woman from the very family the Sterlings had displaced years before. I wasn't a Sterling by blood. I was the biological daughter of the people my family had ruined. The slow label, the medications, the isolation, it wasn't just because of my dyslexia. It was because the more I grew, the more I looked like the enemy. They had to keep me suppressed, so I would never go looking for my real roots. The $47 million check wasn't a reward for my struggle. It was Beatrice's way of paying back the debt she owed to my real family, using me as the bridge. "You were a project, Sloane," my mother choked out, finally looking up. Her face was a mask of cold regret. "Alistair hated looking at you because you were a constant reminder that he wasn't the great man he claimed to be. He treated you like a defect because, to him, your very existence was a failure of his ego." I looked at the $47 million check sitting on the vault table. Then I looked at the original, unforged deeds I had just saved from the fire. The irony was sickening. I had spent my life trying to prove I was a worthy Sterling, only to find out that being a Sterling was the most shameful thing I could be. I wasn't the slow daughter of a real estate mogul. I was the stolen child of the working class, raised in a golden cage by the people who had robbed my ancestors. Where are they? I asked, my voice dropping to a dangerous, low vibrato. My real family, the people on these deeds. Gone, Eleanor whispered. Disappeared into the city decades ago. That's why the money is for you, Sloane. It ends the cycle. You take the money, you move to Europe, and we all forget this ever happened. Forget. I let out a sharp, jagged laugh. You drugged me for 20 years. You let Vivienne mock me. You let Alistair treat me like a subhuman. And you want me to forget. I grabbed the digital drive Silas had given me, the one containing the offshore accounts and the evidence of the forged deeds. I'm not moving to Europe, Mom, I said, standing tall. And I'm not keeping this money. Sloane, don't be a fool. Eleanor scrambled to her feet. Without that money, you're just a girl with a learning disability and no last name. You'll be destroyed. I've already been destroyed, I said, walking toward the exit. Now it's time to see how the Sterling Empire handles a total collapse. I walked out of the vault, leaving my mother in the dust of her own lies. Marcus was waiting by the SUV, his face grim. We have to move, Sloane. The press is already picking up the story of Vivienne's arrest. The sharks are circling the company. Good, I said, tossing the $47 million check onto the dashboard. Because we're not going to the press. We're going to the one place my father fears more than the SEC. Where's that? The public square, I said. It's time to give the empire back to the people it was stolen from. But as we pulled out of the industrial park, a black sedan swerved in front of us, blocking the road. The door opened, and a man stepped out. He wasn't a fixer. He wasn't a Fed. He was an old man with tired eyes, holding a photograph that looked exactly like me. The man's hands were trembling. They told me you died in the hospital, he whispered, his voice cracking like dry parchment. They told us the Sterling family took care of the arrangements. My name is Julian Varga. My father owned the land under Sterling Plaza. And 30 years ago, I lost a sister. The final piece of the puzzle clicked into place. My dyslexia wasn't a defect, it was a trait. Julian's family were master architects and draftsmen. We didn't see letters. We saw structures. The Sterlings hadn't just stolen land. They had stolen a person to secure a fortune. I looked back at the $47 million check resting on the dashboard. Then I looked at Julian. I'm not a Sterling, I said, the words feeling like a weight lifting off my soul. And I think it's time the Vargas got their land back. The next 48 hours were a global media firestorm. I didn't hide. I didn't go to a clinic. I sat down for a live, primetime interview with the very same news outlets that had covered the Legacy Gala. But I didn't talk about my struggles. I talked about the Sterling global fraud. I released the recordings. I released the forged deeds. And most importantly, I publicly signed over the $47 million check to a foundation dedicated to restoring the properties and wealth stolen from families like the Vargas. The fallout was instantaneous. Alistair Sterling, indicted on 24 counts of racketeering and corporate fraud. He's currently serving 15 years in a federal penitentiary, where he has no one to talk to but the walls. Vivienne Sterling. Her reputation was so thoroughly destroyed that no firm in the world would hire her. She's currently living in a cramped apartment in Jersey City, working as a junior clerk, the very low-level life she once mocked me for. Eleanor Sterling disappeared from the social scene entirely, living in self-imposed exile, haunted by the ghost of the daughter she tried to erase. As for me, I dropped the name Sterling. I am Sloane Varga now. I don't use pills. I don't hide my dyslexia. I started a design firm that specializes in visual mapping for complex urban projects. It turns out, when you stop trying to read the world the way others want you to, you start seeing the blueprints for a much better future. My parents called me the slow one. They thought I was the weak link in their chain. They didn't realize that I was the one who would eventually pull the whole thing down. The Witford, now Sterling, empire is gone. And for the first time in my life, I can read the signs perfectly. They all say the same thing, freedom. If you enjoyed this story of justice and the ultimate comeback, make sure to hit that like button and share this video with someone who needs to know their weakness might actually be their greatest strength. Don't forget to subscribe to Silent Revenge Lab for more incredible stories where the underdog finally bites back. Comment revenge down below if you stayed until the very end. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next one.